I remember as a kid looking at the Motorola Razr as the epitome of cool. A sleek flip phone with style for days. Now, in that era, Motorola held about 10 to 20% of the global phone market, behind the Goliath Nokia. Now, while this has gone back and forth over the years, with the folding of LG quite recently, Motorola has now stuck with third place behind the obvious forerunners Samsung and Apple. Now, with the rather underwhelming release a few years ago of the Razr folding phone, it seems that Motorola has continued its persistence to corner the affordable smartphone market. The question is, can it do so with the G22? Let's find out. In the UK, the G22 comes with 64GB of expandable storage, MediaTek Helio G37 processor, 4GB of RAM, and a 6.5-inch HD LCD display. So far, par for the course at £140. With its 5000 mAh battery and 90Hz refresh rate though, they start hitting some big shots. On the back, there's a huge 50MP main camera sensor with an 8MP ultra-wide and 2MP macro with a 2MP depth camera complementing it. On the front, we have a hole-punch 8MP selfie camera as well. The build of the G22 holds no surprises, other than a welcome headphone jack. It consists of a plastic build with a mildly textured rear surface, which is rather prone to fingerprints. A volume rocker, slightly out from the surface, and a flush power/fingerprint reader, which can make it a bit hard to feel out when you aren't looking. Often in my uses, I would find myself struggling to find the power button and would have to reposition my hand to conform. Rearranging the phone in hand actually is a risk factor as well, due to the phone's highly slippery nature, something an included plastic case could have easily solved. The phone has down-firing speakers that are adequate so long as you don't cover them with your hand. Headphones are best though, that's where that handy headphone jack comes in. We also have our USB Type-C port and our microphone. One thing worthwhile to note is that while the phone feels quite solid, it has no IP-rated water resistance and does not use Gorilla Glass on its screen, so be careful. My first instances with the Moto G22 filled me a bit with dread. So when I was starting the phone up for the first time, connecting it to Wi-Fi, it would start downloading updates, which are obviously necessary for the continuation of the phone. However, it kept shutting down. It did this 3 times before I ended up just turning off the Wi-Fi and setting it up offline. I did this, set up absolutely fine, and then what I had to do is go back online and update those security updates and software updates a bit later. So that did solve my issue, but didn't fill me with the most optimistic ideas with this phone to start off with. In general day-to-day use, unfortunately, the G22 continues this trend. Now, while the hardware looks fantastic on paper for the price, the constant lagging and app crashing really denigrates the experience. Firstly, the typing. Now, while that's not unpleasant in itself, it really is quite frustrating. I ended up turning off the haptics because the haptics were far from refined. In fact, it felt like there was actually something loose underneath the display when I was doing it, which was really disconcerting. Without the haptics, the experience is still not up to par, as there is a long gap between tapping on the typing bar and the letters themselves appearing. Now, look, while not a deal breaker on paper, it really does have a huge impact on day-to-day usability of the phone. This lag also means that the gesture control, that really does run well on other Android phones, struggles here. So much so that I found myself utilizing the 3-button system instead to improve the phone experience. Now onto the camera system of the Moto G22. Now that 50MP main sensor camera really does take some solid photos. As you can see here, in good lighting the main camera sensor is able to give a clear image with decent detail retention, and the same is true of the ultra-wide. However, what you'll notice between the lenses is that there is often a shift in color, changing the images considerably. This has a lot to do with the main issue that Moto has in its camera system, i.e. with low light. With the small light sensors residing within the camera lenses, and importantly the lack of intuitive software to make up for it, the Moto really struggles when that light drops. This is especially true with the macro sensor, as low light shots are realistically unusable, with not much of an improvement with the ultra-wide and below par results on that main sensor. Flip to the front and we have the same issue. You really do have to be in the perfect lighting conditions to take a usable self-portrait. Now here's a quick audio and video quality test on the Motorola G22. This is using two studio lights, one here and here, and the main sensor camera. This is a video and audio test of the Moto G22 selfie camera. Now, what I've found is that I have to make sure I hold the phone on its side so I'm not blocking the mic on the bottom, as it muffles all of the sound. And that can be quite awkward when trying to move with it in case you drop it. So, no great thing there. As you can see, the main issue that the Moto G22 has in its video really is with low light. It does have adequate results in the day, but you really have to just forget night video with this phone. The grain is so high that it just makes it feel like a dot painting in motion. The lack of optical image stabilization means that a tripod or extraordinarily steady hands will be needed to avoid constant reenactments of the Blair Witch movie. With regards to connectivity on the G22, I had no major issues whatsoever. The Wi-Fi stayed consistent and had a decent range. With cellular, the only time I ever really experienced a dropout was driving on country roads where the nearest cell phone tower was basically a trip to Sauron away, so no major issues there. And with Bluetooth, again, I experienced no dropouts when it was connected to my headphones or to my car speaker. With a 90Hz display and strong connectivity, social media should be a breeze for this phone. However, constant lag on the infinite scroll made the experience of an endless romp into FOMO an unsatisfactory one. The peak brightness of 460 nits is good enough at this price point. However, it can be relatively hard to discern the pictures on the phone screen at this level in direct sunlight. So it's something to be aware of if you live in particularly sunny areas. Now, battery life. This is one element of the G22 that really does stand up to the specs on paper. With the 5000 mAh battery inside here, it will get you through a day of use with no problems at all. In fact, with moderate use, I would estimate about 50% battery life remaining. So that includes a bit of videoing, some gaming, a couple hours of scrolling through Facebook. That will get you to the end of the day with around that figure. Heavier use, you might see yourself dropping to 20 or 30% if you're watching some videos as well. However, light use, that's where this thing really shines. I found myself one day with a bit of scrolling, about half an hour of web browsing and a few phone calls, finishing with 90% battery life remaining. Now that is an extraordinarily impressive result and could potentially get you through, in fact, 3 days without having to charge it. Gaming is actually quite a pleasant experience on the G22. Call of Duty, for instance, runs smoothly and takes advantage of that 90Hz refresh rate. The only real issue with gaming here, apart from limitation on hardware for particularly intensive games like Genshin Impact, is the amount of storage you have available on the device. With only 64GB, you may find yourself wanting after downloading a few games and filming a few videos. However, this is easily rectified with the use of a microSD card expansion. One major plus of the G22 is its practically stock Android 12 experience. There is minimal bloatware on this phone, simply coming in the form of Moto notifications, a wallpaper app, and a help app. However, this all has to be taken with a grain of salt, because despite being almost stock, that first major gripe comes in again, i.e. its responsiveness. The phone is just simply laggy. Swiping onto the Google News section and back even comes at cost of your precious time and sanity. So, is the Motorola G22 worth it? Short answer, no. At this price point, there are just so many more phones you could get, including Motorola's own G31, which sits cheaper than this phone, but has the same size battery, an AMOLED screen, and is much more responsive. This is where the G22 really does let itself down. I just cannot recommend this phone unless you love being frustrated. waiting for something to load, or importantly, just waiting for that keypad to pop up is a highly annoying experience. What I'd recommend is that if you can stretch the budget, try to get a Pixel 6a or a OnePlus Nord 2T. If you can't, you'd be much better off dropping down £30 and buying a G31, as you'll get much better responsiveness and I believe will be much happier overall. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe down below. This is Everyday Tech. Have a good one.